Average. Out of every word my manager could have used, that was the one he chose. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and looked around the conference room as if he'd just made an inspiring speech. Emma is reliable, he said. She shows up on time. She works hard. But let's be honest. She's average. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One director looked down at his notebook. Another cleared his throat. Nobody laughed. Nobody defended me either. I simply closed my notebook, smiled, and wrote one sentence across the top of the page. Effective immediately. At that moment, my manager thought he'd ended my career. He had no idea. He had just started the countdown to the worst week of his professional life. Before I tell you what happened after that meeting, subscribe to Hidden Truth Chronicles, where every story proves that the people you underestimate today may be the ones everyone depends on tomorrow. Now, here's how it all began. My name is Emma Parker. For 10 years, I worked at Northgate Systems, a software company with nearly 2,000 employees. I wasn't a vice president. I wasn't a department head. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room. I was a senior operations coordinator. Not exactly a title that impresses people at dinner parties. But inside Northgate, everyone knew my extension. When a client escalated an issue, they called me. When a project slipped behind schedule, they called me. When two departments stopped speaking to each other, guess who got dragged into the middle? One afternoon, our IT manager joked, "If this company ever loses electricity, we'll still call Emma before we call the power company." I laughed. "I'll bring a flashlight." Even he admitted, "That's probably why we'd call you." The truth was simple. I wasn't brilliant. I wasn't a genius. I was consistent. And consistency quietly becomes invisible until it's gone. My manager, Brian Collins, didn't see it that way. Brian loved flashy presentations, buzzwords, leadership books he'd never finished reading. He believed confidence was more important than competence. His favorite sentence was, "We need stars, not workhorses." Funny thing about that. Stars get applause. Workhorses pull the wagon. For the first few years, Brian and I worked well together. Then he started hiring people who looked good in meetings but disappeared when real work arrived. Every time one of them failed, the unfinished work landed on my desk. I never complained, because I believed results eventually speak for themselves. I was right, just not in the way I expected. 3 days after that meeting, I printed a single page. My resignation letter. No dramatic speech. No angry email. Just one page. I placed it in an envelope and walked into Brian's office. He glanced up from his phone. "What's this?" "My resignation." He looked at the letter, then at me. "You're serious?" "Very." He shrugged. "I'll be honest, Emma. I think you're making an emotional decision." I smiled. "No. I've been thinking about this for months." He leaned back in his chair. "You'll find out pretty quickly that companies don't stop because one person leaves." "I hope you're right." He signed the acceptance form in less than 30 seconds. Not once did he ask why I was leaving. Not once did he ask what I actually did every day. That told me everything I needed to know. My resignation was scheduled to be discussed at the quarterly board meeting. Normally, resignations weren't even mentioned. But I'd spent 10 years leading a cross-functional operations team responsible for coordinating product launches across 5 departments. The board wanted to know who would take over. Brian walked into the meeting with all the confidence in the world. When my resignation letter appeared on the agenda, the board chair, Margaret Ellis, adjusted her glasses and began reading. She paused halfway through, then looked up. "Brian, when did Emma resign?" 3 days ago." "And what retention efforts did you make?" Brian blinked. "We accepted her decision." Margaret frowned. "You accepted it?" "Yes." She closed the letter. "Did you ask why she was leaving?" "No." "Did you offer a counterproposal?" "No." The room fell silent. Then the chief operating officer spoke. "Who's taking over Emma's responsibilities?" Brian answered almost immediately. "We'll distribute her workload across the team." The COO looked confused. "Which team?" Brian listed 3 names. The COO slowly shook his head. "Those 3 report to Emma." Brian's confidence slipped. Margaret opened another folder. According to operations, Emma personally coordinated 83 active projects. She turned another page. She also mentors every new operations coordinator. Another page. She approves vendor escalations. Another. She oversees compliance reviews. Another. She is the only employee certified on the new logistics platform. Brian swallowed hard. I wasn't aware she handled all of that. The chief financial officer couldn't hide a smile. That's the problem. You weren't aware. The following Monday was my last day. People I'd never even worked with stopped by my desk. Some brought coffee. Some brought cards. One engineer walked over carrying a box of donuts. I heard you're leaving. I am. He sighed. I was hoping that wasn't true. Why? He laughed. Because every time my department got into trouble, you fixed it. For the first time in 10 years. I realized something. The people doing the work had always known my value. The only person who didn't was the one responsible for evaluating it. 2 weeks after I left, my phone rang. It was Margaret Ellis. Emma, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. I'd like to ask you something. I'm listening. The board has completed its review. We discovered your departure delayed 2 product launches, increased operating costs, and exposed several leadership failures. I stayed quiet. She continued. We've made some changes. What kind of changes? Brian Collins is no longer managing the operations division. I looked out the window. Not because I was celebrating. Because I wasn't surprised. Margaret took a breath. We'd also like to offer you a position. I smiled. What position? Director of Operational Excellence. You would report directly to me instead of middle management. I laughed softly. That's quite a promotion. It's also an apology. I accepted. Not because Brian had lost his job, but because the company had finally learned something important. When I returned 3 weeks later, I didn't ask for Brian's old office. I didn't ask for a bigger parking space. Instead, I held my first meeting with every supervisor in the department. I wrote one sentence on the whiteboard. Never confuse quiet with average. Then I looked around the room. The best employees don't always advertise what they do. Sometimes they're too busy keeping everyone else from failing. The room nodded. Because now, they understood. My manager called me average. The board called me essential. And in the end, only one opinion changed the future. If you enjoyed this workplace revenge story, subscribe to Hidden Truth Chronicles for more powerful stories about office politics, quiet resilience, and the kind of karma that doesn't need to raise its voice.